great. So we already have quite a lot of attendees. Again, thank you everyone for coming. And it's 10 a.m., at least here in Europe, and we can begin. So hello, dear everyone who is already joining or who will be watching this on a video recording later on. My name is Jane, and you reached the Roastrum panel. Roastrum is a new project run by Stronghold Square, where we invite the professionals from all over the world to talk about the hot topics of roasting and the coffee world overall. Stronghold Square is overall a community platform by Stronghold, which is created for community and by community. Why Square? Square is somewhere where we get together. So for us, roasters, coffee lovers, coffee professionals, coffee brewers, judges, and many other coffee people in this great industry, it's just a place when we get together and share our knowledge. And this is one big reason why we run our events in the panel style, because there are so many great opinions, and it's so great to hear how professionals talk between each other about the coffee topics. So in order not to miss our upcoming events, please follow Stronghold Square on Facebook and Instagram, and make sure to join us next time as well. In the meantime, today, I am pleased to introduce you to those great three speakers we have for here today. So John Gordon is joining us from New Zealand. Mateusz is joining us from Poland. And Dajo is joining us from France. And all together, we represent the experience of barista, roasters, judges, who have a lot of experience working with competitions. And today our panel is aimed to be discussing the roasting for competitions. So I would like to pass an introduction word to everyone. So John, can we start with you?
Hi everyone, my name is John Gordon. I'm got my nightcap here for the evening. So I've been in coffee for 15 odd years plus, in hospitality for 23 years now. In terms of competition and coffee, my competition days started in 2009, and I competed in the UK Barista Championship while living in the UK. I didn't do too well then, but actually that year I actually managed to win the UK Latte Art Championship, and went on to place 6th in the world in the 2009 World Latte Art Championships. Then I went on to win the 2010 UK Barista Championships, and narrowly missed out by half a point in the semi-finals in the World Championships in London that year. 2011 won the UK Barista Championship again and managed to get 6th place in the finals in Colombia, in Bogota. The most amazing WBC ever, I think. In 2013, actually in 2012, I did a little bit of judging and coaching. So judging in Ireland actually, and coaching for barista and brewers. And 2013 won the UK Barista Championship again, and made the semi-finals. And I think that year I placed 10th after making some pretty big mistakes in the semi-finals. Then I went on to help Sasha Sestic as one of his coaches in 2015 to win the World Barista Championships. And then 2016 and 17, I was coaching a couple of regional champions in Melbourne, Victoria, which was a lot of fun. And 2018, decided to compete again in New Zealand, and won the Barista Championship here, and then placed 6th in the world again in the World Championships in Amsterdam. And 2019, I started dived into coaching a bit again, and coached the New Zealand champion who went on to the semi-finals, and also roasted his coffee as well on top of that. So yeah, that's kind of the length of those little bits and
quite
pieces.
a big experience with competition, John.
Yeah, that's just the competition stuff. So yeah.
Thank you for joining us today. So, Josh, word to you.
To me? Yes, sorry, hi, my name is Matt. I come from Poland. My barista experience started in 2006 in Ireland. That was the spontaneous decision to start working for the cafe. It was a chain, but ever since I love coffee and energy of people in a cafe. So I've decided to change my way of life from like simple hospitality work to actual passion. Fortunately, I've met right people on my path. This made me to move to London, where I actually met you, John, a long time ago. We both look different back in the days. So I joined the team of Taylor Street Baristas. That was 2010, with no bigger success back in the days. But that was very passionate team of big group of baristas from all over the world. And I found this experience as the most valuable in a barista experience for me, because we both connected the specialty and the commercial market in a cafe. Very busy cafe, and I'm very thankful to work with Andrew Tolley, for example, who taught me a lot as a barista. I also shared the barista experience with Sanko, who you worked with as well. And after London, I moved back to Poland for quite a bit, and then I joined a London company again called Ristretto. So we did lots of catering events with specialty coffee all over the world. That was also a very valuable experience, because I could learn many different styles of coffee culture all over the world. Because one part of the job was to bring the coffee to the event, and the other one was to actually experience. So yeah, I learned lots about Turkish coffee scene, like Southern coffee scene. So that opened my mind and taught me that actually the specialty coffee scene is different everywhere. So that was very nice. After London, I moved to Amsterdam, where with Kim Stallman, I was helping to a coffee company who was trying to introduce the specialty coffee to the coffee chain. And eventually I moved back to Poland, where I met Aldon Srobotin, who is 2015 World Roasting Champion. And we started the specialty roastery in the middle of Poland, of not very well-known city called Bydgoszcz. And ever since, so 2014, we roast coffee for the Polish market and market all over the world, actually. And last year, I was lucky to to actually extend the knowledge of my roasting guru, so Audun. And I placed third in World Championships 2019 in Taipei. Since then, I'm focused a lot on trainings and roasting itself. I kind of put barista passion on the side, and I decided to focus 100% on roasting. And since then, I trained a Norwegian roastery that is a finalist. I have to mention that Norwegian roasteries compete, like 70 roasteries competes in the competition, so it's quite tough to get to the finals.
Wow. I'm surprised to hear that so many, taking into account that other competitions are not that popular. So wow.
Yeah, it's same story with Korea as far as I know, but we'll talk about it later. So small roastery from Hamar. It's a central part of Norway. They went to the finals, so I wish them best in the Norwegian competition. And I also had the pleasure to roast the coffee for a Norwegian Brewers Cup champion, who also won the competition last year. So seems like it's gonna be a very trainy year next year if everything will be on the right place. So I'm happy to be with you guys.
I'm also so happy that you joined us today. So passing the word to Dajo.
Hi everyone, my name is Dajo. I'm originally from Belgium, but I live in France at the moment. I am a sport teacher originally, and that's kind of how I rolled into coffee eventually. I from a young age, I've always been doing a lot of sports on high level, both basketball and then ultimate frisbee. For some people who might know that sport. I was in the national team playing international competitions. And for that reason, I actually moved to Australia for 1 year to play with a team there. And I needed some part-time job. And that's how I started washing dishes in a coffee shop and learned about coffee, something I really didn't know much about before. And kind of slowly rolled into the coffee industry. So that was 2011. Then I moved back to France because my girlfriend is French, and started doing some extra shifts at a small roastery here. It's called Coffee Makers. That was kind of the first coffee shop in the city I live in Lille, in 2014. And that's where I started to learn how to roast from 2015 onwards. And then in 2016, I had the opportunity to go live in Brazil for 9 months, which was an amazing experience. I lived with a small family of farmers who was moving towards specialty coffee, who at the time they just bought a sample roaster but didn't know how to use it. So together we kind of started roasting and tasting all their coffees. And that period really taught me a lot about the production side of coffee, about tasting coffee, buying, exporting, the whole logistics. And it really developed my cupping skills. So when I came back to France in 2017, my boss motivated me to compete in the French Cup Tasters Championships, which I won out of the blue. There was a big surprise, not only for me, but for everybody, because no one knew me back then in the French scene. I came kind of out of nowhere from the small city in Lille. So yeah, then I could go to Brazil to the World Championships, where I placed 18th first time. That was my first major experience on the international coffee scene. 2019, I managed to win again in France, and then really took it to the next level, my training, and placed second at the World Championships last year in Berlin. From a roasting for competition perspective, maybe I have the less experience compared to the other panelists here.
But we will come back to this.
Yeah, okay.
Round of questions.
No worries. So I'll just, I've been a judge in Brewers Cup 2019, and I was planning to participate in Brewers Cup myself this year and roast the coffee.
Thank you. So here I am, also moderating, but also a person who has some experience in this, not as much as you guys. But I'm the world certified judge for brewing and roasting, and actually cup tasting is my favorite competition. So I met Dajo in France when I was brewing the cup tasting and at the same time judging the brewers together. So this was I was quite there all the time. So I also coach for competitions, mainly for Brewers Cup, and judge this competition quite a lot. As well as I am teaching brewing and sensory as AST. So trying to look from different sides to it. So thank you for the introduction around. Dear attendees who are watching us, please feel free to chat in our chat panel, share where are you from, who are you, what's your experience. Other than this, there is a functionality of Q&A in the bottom where I would encourage you to leave your questions to our panelists today, and I will be trying to get back to those questions if we can. So just make sure that your questions are left in Q&A section, and the chat is here for you. You're free to chat with each other once we are speaking. So my first question is to all our speakers. I understand this is a very broad topic, but can you briefly describe what do you think about how different is approaching the competition roasting comparing to the regular roasting, or what is a competition coffee or competition roasting for you?
John, can you start?
Want me to start? Okay.
Yeah, you got the biggest experience.
I had a long think about this over the weekend, and I think years ago when I first started in competition, for me it was definitely finding the right coffee. It could have been majority of the time it was they were generally coffees that were coffees that were in a list that were already there. So coffees that we used to already have at Square Mile anyway. So nothing specific was kind of purchased back then. And these were to me these were coffees that were just roasted to the best of their abilities, if that makes any sense. And I was thinking this over the weekend, and throughout kind of 2010, 2011, 2013, these were coffees that were I thought were perfect competition coffees that were also accessible coffees for our customers as well, and so that I found quite important. And then going into the kind of later years, and especially 2018, I found it very different in terms of looking for very different styles of coffees. Obviously there were many kind of alternative processing methods kind of floating about by that stage, and also from my side, it was a very different approach to the way it used to be, in terms of starting to roast for the score sheet. And when I say roasting for the score sheet, I mean in the sense of rather than roasting that coffee to where I think it is at its absolute optimum, which may have had some aspects of kind of unbalanced characteristics, but in its own right an amazing coffee. I think it was getting to the point where you would taste something, and even though it would be amazing, like a specific, more so on the acidity side, I would say, it would be amazing acidity, but not something that would necessarily score highly, or it would take something a little bit too far out of balance for the score sheet. So I found myself between 2018 and coaching for the New Zealand, coaching and roasting for the New Zealand champion in 2019, was about finding the right characteristics or the right strength of each coffee to be able to maximize the amount of points on the score sheet, whether it was flavor attributes or those modalities, so the sweetness, acidity, and bitterness, and then obviously the texture being a huge one there. So I found sometimes, even though some particular aspect might be amazing, it might not necessarily relate or score too well on the score sheet. So you'd be, changing some of the roasting styles to either highlight something a little bit stronger and reduce something else to be able to create that balance, between all of those aspects. And you know, in 2018, 2019, I really found a kind of new avenue of doing a few different things in terms of pushing for texture as well, and unusual texture, new textures and things like that, which I thought were was something that was very strong on the score sheet, to be able to create some interesting textures, some things that we hadn't really tasted before because of a lot of these alternative processing methods. Really bringing something out completely different in coffees that I hadn't tasted before. So in that respect, it was, you know, 10 years ago, it was roasting to the best of the coffee's ability, and now I feel like it's, for me anyway, it's been roasting for the score sheet and potentially not really giving the coffee the best opportunity to you know, really make all of its components shine 100%. So yeah, it's kind of a bit of a torn love at the moment of understanding whether or not we should just be roasting coffee to its absolute best or roasting to specifically for a competition. But it needs to be more accessible at the end of the day, realistically. So
I see. Thank you. That's quite a big experience you have, quite roasting. Let's hear out what other finalists have to say.
Yeah.
Maybe let's move to you this time.
Sure. So I definitely agree that for competition, you really need to check the score sheet. That's what's going to make you score points, and that's super important. Another thing I think is important when we compare to regular roasting compared to competition roasting is the fact that probably you're going to have a lot less coffee, or it's going to be really expensive. So I think you need to select, when it comes to green coffee, select a coffee you're comfortable with in some kind of way to roast, because you won't have that many chances to roast it. So source a coffee that has, from the green perspective, a lot of potential quality to score, but then also know that, and especially I'm talking about these crazy processes, which can be hard to roast if you don't have experience with that, or if you don't have a person that's going to help you that has experience with that. It might be really tricky and dangerous to select that kind of coffee. So yeah, maximize your chances, I would say, to get the best out of a small batch of coffee. Whereas if in a production roast, maybe you have maybe like 5 bags, it's less of a problem if you screw up a couple of batches. If you only have like 5 kilos, there's less margin of error, I would say.
Yeah, so true. Thank you, Dajo. So, Mateusz, your experience roasting for competitions?
Well, my experience when it comes to the roasting for competitors specifically is actually, I had 2 situations where we went to the finals. So one was with Ole from Norway, and one was with Michał from for the national competitions, who placed 6th or 5th? 6th. So there are 2 completely different experiences, because with Ole, we've chosen the right coffee that actually entered our regular production. There was washed geisha from Panama. So the coffee had the attributes to score points, but the only disadvantage was the processing of this coffee. But specifically, in my opinion, for this market, when it comes to Norway, the score sheets can be interpreted slightly different than somewhere else, because Norway is all about washed coffees and clarity and sweetness, not necessarily the physical attributes of the coffee. So this coffee made it very well in the finals. Where it comes to the Polish competitions, we've chosen the coffee that actually could score the points because of its attributes, so sweetness, balance, and body. So this coffee we worked with for 3 weeks just to find the perfect profile and the perfect color. when it actually matched our expectations, we decided to release it. So in one case, we roasted specifically for the score sheet. I think it went very well. In the other case, it was just amazing skill of Ole and actually the very fortunate roast of this Panaman coffee. So two different ways of roasting coffee for the competitions. In my opinion, like statistically, I would rather just go for the regular style of roasting, because for us, like every production roast must be like a competition roast, because we always try to hit the right color to be in the frame where the coffee has exposed the maximum potential of the coffee, and this is technically the competition for us, to just never disappoint the customers. So our background is competition when it comes to the production roasting.
This is a great approach. Thank you, Mateusz. So
Thanks.
today I would like to approach this whole complex question of roasting for competitions from different sides. And I would like to start first with the side of judge and coach, because like you know this side pretty well. What John said is that it's worse to be roasting in the way that it hits the points on the score sheet. So from judge perspective, what are we looking in the coffee which is rather made by roasting or sourcing than by brewing? And here we should probably separate the barista and brewer's cup for a second, but also maybe find some similarities in them. From judge and coach perspective, what do we want to get specifically? What are the attributes we want in the coffee which comes from roasting? John, maybe you would like to answer here.
Yeah, sure. I think from my perspective, from the past when coaching and definitely and I think kind of a lot of the times when you're being a coach as well, you're kind of playing that role of the judge as well. So I think first and foremost, and this makes it easier for the barista, is to create clarity and definition over flavor. Mm-hmm. So if your characteristics are easy for a judge to pick out, then it makes everybody's job a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable. So from that perspective, when you're and that goes, I think first and foremost that that really does come down to the roasting, because you can have the most amazing coffee and with the most complex flavors, but depending on how you roast it, everything can be really boiled into one and be a little bit too difficult to define specific characteristics. You can have a lot of explosion of flavor and texture and really interesting attributes, but without being able to specifically narrow down those characteristics, it makes it a lot harder for the judges to be searching for these attributes and then score them. Whereas if you know your roaster very well, if you know the coffee very well, then you know what to be. And this goes back to, again, kind of sometimes having to sacrifice some things to be able to gain clarity. And that's just a given, really. It's not often that you can find a coffee that performs every single time in any style of roaster, and for that matter, any style of brewing as well. So aside from really kind of pushing those boundaries of understanding your machine as much as possible, to be able to create clarity and texture, and because you can have a whole lot of flavor and no texture whatsoever, or you can have the opposite side. You can have a whole lot of texture and not very interesting flavors. So to be able to find that balance, and that definitely is the key, I think anyway, from a judge's and a coach's perspective, is finding that balance and that clear definition in those characteristics. So it's when you're communicating those pieces of information for the judges, that when you're walking them through that and they're tasting those coffees, they need to be able to they can't search for it. It needs to be a tick. Each time it needs to be very easy for them to be able to experience it. So definitely the toughest job there is finding that clarity and then being able to repeat that clarity even more so. With any roaster, even the best technology in the world, making sure that you can repeat it is the key, and then repeating it on the day. So aside from your roasting, then it comes down to recipe and things like that, and how you're actually brewing it. But yeah, that's the biggest thing for me is definition, clarity, and texture.
Thank you. Dajo, from your side, you are a roaster, but also a judge for Brewers Cup. On your opinion, what as a judge will you be looking for in Brewers Cup that is possible to be made by roasting, or at least highlighted by roasting?
Sure. So I judged Brewers Cup. Something important to note is that as a judge for Brewers Cup, and I guess for the other competitions as well, we are not there to judge your roasting. We are not going to note, oh, I thought this should be developed more or less. No, but we are going to evaluate what you are telling us and see if that matches. And that's where I completely join John, that you need to look for clarity. And definitely avoid any roast defects. And I think specifically for Brewers Cup is something that people tend to be very afraid of over roasting, so that you get some coffees that are more to the too light side. And where you will have maybe you will hit an apricot note, but you will also have some peas, some green notes that will be there, and that will definitely take down your notes, both from flavor side but also aftertaste. So I think yeah, it's really hitting the perfect clarity. Don't have any under or overdeveloped notes. So that we exactly can tick off the positive characteristics that are being put in front, that should come out of the coffee.
So we have a look at what you get the most in a score sheet in the context of Brewers Cup. Don't be mistaken by having acidity as double, because it still has to be juicy, sweet, and balanced. So don't be afraid to roast it well. Mateusz, what would you like to add? Because you have experience roasting for both. Regarding Brewers Cup and then regarding the barista, what are the attributes that you can get with roasting, on your opinion?
Well, I think the major task for the coffee roaster, besides of roasting the coffee well, is just to open the biggest window of the successful brew for the barista or the brewer. So if you roast your coffee to the certain level, where even if on the competition scene the brew might be slightly off, my personal ambition is to minimize the window of the error for the competitors. So if the coffee is roasted well, then you get the bigger chance to brew it well. I think it's much tougher in case of the barista competitions because of the brew size, and technically espresso on the competition scene, I believe it's much more difficult to brew than Brewers Cup because of the quantity of the brews and the quantity of the brewed coffee. My personal experience is that the less you brew, the smaller the window of the success is. So that's why the espresso doesn't taste very well very often, or it's bigger chance to make it bad than the filter coffee. So specifically for the espresso, I think because as a roastery we focused on the roast color with the roast profile, of course, but I think that color matters specifically for the espresso. So it's best to deliver three different styles of coffee for the competition itself, so the barista can choose actually before the start. That's my experience. Probably John has more samples and more experience in brewing espresso on the competitions, and he probably took dozens of the roast profiles and styles. But I think as a coffee roaster, you just you should provide your competitor the comfortable feeling of what he has as a good product. So he doesn't have to be worried about the roast. He has to be worried about his presentation.
Amazing.
So that's my experience.
Okay, I think we kindly slightly touched it from this side, and I would like to move to the side of the competitor. And here maybe we can generate together some advices on how to approach. So you decide to compete, and then obviously you start to look for coffee, and you start to look for a roaster. Maybe you start to look to roast it yourself. The first question from this side is probably with how to best approach the participation for the competition. On your opinion, should the competitor source the coffee himself or not, roast the coffee himself or not? And what kind of roaster support should the competitor be seeking for? Who would like to start?
Okay, I can start. First of all, I think it's really important to say that anybody can compete. You don't need to be in a really big company with a lot of money. It's really, this is very important to say. I, for example, competed this year in Brewers Cup without and much support from my own company. But it's important to seek for help and not be scared to search for help. I think we're in a great community, and even if you're maybe new and you don't know a lot of people, don't be scared to go out and ask for help. You'd be surprised to see how many people can actually help you. So that being said, it all depends on your experience. I would say, like which parts you would outsource. There's definitely the green coffee part. So if you don't have a lot of experience with that, approach yourself to importers, to farms that you trust, that you want to work together with. And then the same for the roasting. If you have experience, if you have a machine, great, do it yourself. If you don't, ask help for someone. And again, my experience this year, there's a lot of possibilities. Of course, it's always better to have the perfect machine. But for example, this year, I planned initially to roast my coffee on a sample roaster. It didn't work. And finally, I roasted 8% batches. So like 1 kilo batches on a 12 kilo machine, which is like completely not something you would recommend to do. And it worked out fine. So don't fix yourself too much in a small frame. There's a lot of possibilities.
Okay, so anyone else would like to join? I think you have quite a big experience here. So what would you advise the competitors who want to compete, where to seek help and what kind of help to seek? And how to start?
Yeah, I think for me in the past, it has always been a combination of finding the coffee first or coming up with the concept first. So depending on, I think I've almost switched from year to year throughout all of the competitions that I've done. Sometimes the coffee has come along with a great story, and that's been great, and it's fit in with what I wanted to communicate on stage. And other times I've come up with a concept first, and then specifically searched out a coffee for that specific thing. Going back to what you said earlier about the combination of roasting yourself or sourcing the green coffee yourself. If you've got those resources to utilize, then that's great. I remember the first time that I did it, I was getting a coffee from Ethiopia actually, and it was the most stressful thing for me ever, because I was dealing with that side of things, and it was only a few bags of coffee. So one, dealing with being able to get coffee out of Ethiopia, that was something very specific. There were 3 different varietals. And 2, just going through that whole process, it was really just stressful, and it took a lot of time away from what I should have been doing, which was practicing. On the roasting side, 2018 was the first time that I'd actually roasted for myself, and that was also extremely stressful. So there's understanding where your limitations are and how much you can actually do in one go is a really big deal, and also how much resources you have to pull from. And in 2018, I was very stubborn in the sense that I didn't ask for help until quite later on in the piece, and that made everyone's lives around me that were helping me much more difficult. So if there is that opportunity to ask for help, or if people are offering that help, then take every single piece possible. It will make your life much easier. And I think maybe as competitors, we maybe spend a little bit too much time focusing on the things that aren't important. And I know I have 100% in the past. I've focused on things that are just not important whatsoever, and realistically the important things need to be the story and the things that you want to be able to communicate and making tasty coffee. So if you have those resources, pull from them. If not, and you're roasting yourself, you're sourcing yourself and all those kind of things, then scheduling. So I still have my folder up in my garage for everything that I was doing up this year for competition, because I had 5 different coffees. 2 were going to be backup coffees, and I batch froze everything, and I had everything on a spreadsheet, and every time I roasted a coffee, I wrote the date on it and those kind of things. So I always knew where I was. I didn't have to think, oh, no, I've got this coffee here, this coffee there, all those kind of things. So scheduling, planning, I've got a whole wall of whiteboards. So writing things up, writing concepts up, and even utilizing things like I use Google Sheets a lot and things like that, because you can share speeches and things like that with anyone who's helping you anywhere in the world very easily, and you can see edits and things like that, and really being structured and planning is kind of the key. And then that was a big thing for me this year. Even though competition didn't go ahead, I had planned so far ahead that when COVID hit, I could literally put everything on pause and not have a worry in the world. All my green coffee was frozen. All the roasted coffee that I had at the time was frozen. Everything I had set out was just nice and perfect, and I could pack everything away nice and tidy. I wouldn't have to worry about any of my coffee aging or anything like that, and could literally pick it up at any point in time. So planning is definitely key. And yeah, and if you have those resources, whether it's family, friends, don't be afraid to reach out to people from around the world. As we can see right now, our reach around the world is much larger than what it used to be, and it can be very, very helpful to jump on a Zoom call or share files and things like that with people, or videos of practice sessions and things like that. Makes it a hell of a lot easier.
Wow, thank you, John. It's such a big amount of steps and a lot of structure in the head to prepare for it. Mateusz, I would rephrase the question to you. So once the competitor approaches you as a roaster and says that I want you to help me to get my coffee for the competition, As a roaster, how would you expect best this collaboration to go? What would you like to do together in collaboration with the participant? And what are the aspects that you just prepare and give as a fact to the competitor? How it is best and how to take the most of the collaboration with the roaster, on your opinion?
Well, specifically, like in our case, we work together close. So I advise to the brewers or the baristas to collaborate with the roasters in a sense where they see the whole roasting process and they see the final results. So there is no room for the imagination. Is just a fact what's in their cup. So for example, if you can travel to the roaster who will roast coffee for you, please have a cupping with him and share the experience and share the some data just to find the best coffee for himself, so he feels comfortable. And again, I talked to Ola quite a lot at the moment about the coffee for his finals. And my main advice for him is to choose the coffee he feels best, he feels comfortable with, and that can score points, of course. But I don't want to force any competitors to use coffee sourced by me or picked by me. I rather want to feel the competitor comfortable with what he will brew on the competition scene. And in my opinion, there's of course roasting for the score sheets, but at the end of the day, you should brew the coffee that you feel that you like, not the coffee that you you wouldn't drink on everyday basis. So that's one thing. The other thing is just to follow the physical parameters and character of the coffee. So when I worked with Michał, we tracked the roast colors and the roast profiles, so he knew that the coffee is consistent and there is no trap or whatever. So the only thing he had to focus on was playing on the scene, just competing. And I think this is what can you do when you participate with the roaster.
Amazing. So we are closing to the part when we try to speak more about the roaster perspective. But one more question that will be still very important for the competitors to consider. So, on your opinion, and that's like a quick answer from each of you, what is the absolute minimum of coffee the person should have? What is the recommended minimum of coffee that the competitor should have? And what is the real optimum amount of coffee for the competitor to have to plan ahead to prepare for the competition? So here again, just a quick example of always in Norwegian Brewers Cup, a winner who had only 125 grams to prepare because then the post had delayed his coffee and the rest of preparation just went on his competition. So he basically had 250 grams of roasted coffee, but that's more and that's not a good example, I would say. So if you just want to have less stress about all of this, what is the absolute minimum they need to keep in mind? What would you recommend, and what is more like an optimal amount of coffee? Who would like to start? Dayo?
I have no experience in competing, so
yeah, I only for this year I had 10 kilos, and 10 kilos was kind of on the limit. I think I think that's rather the minimum. I think if you have 20, 30, you're better off.
That is quite a lot. Mateusz, any quick guesses from your side?
Again,
who you're talking about?
So how Mateusz, how much coffee did you have with Michał preparing from the barista?
We only had 3.5 kilos, so not much. But we kind of calibrated with when it comes to the physical aspects of brewing on the same coffee, but from different part of the farm. So we actually had like 9 kilos, but the other 6 were just to feel comfortable with the variety and the processing. But the final coffee was just 3 kilos, so not so much.
John, I think you have a lot to say here.
Yeah, definitely more than 3 kilos. I can tell you that much. Yeah, in 2018, I had my espresso coffee in total was 3 kilos green. I think my milk coffee I had was 6 kilos green, and one other, I think might have been about 4 kilos, something like that. And that was stressful enough for me, roasting and competing. But it all depends on your batch size, really. So depending on what roaster you're on, I think you need to, going back to the whole scheduling piece. If you know what you're roasting on, then you know what your minimum batch sizes are, and then you can work from there and work backwards into where you feel comfortable in how many roasts it's going to take to dial in the coffee, how many roasts that you need for the competition, depending on how many heats or levels of the competition there are, and plan for the best case scenario. Plan for your your heats, your semifinals, your finals, because you have to plan out all your roasting and all your roast dates and things like that, and know what your batches are, and know how much you're going to yield for each batch, and know how much your yield is, or your roasted coffee is going to actually, how many shots it's going to give you, depending on whether you're using a traditional grinder or in barista anyway. Whether you're using a traditional grinder or an EK. An EK is obviously a lot more economical because you're getting more out of essentially out of a kilo of coffee. But 2018 was very stressful for me. 2019 was even more stressful, being a coach and a roaster, because we actually had even less coffee than I had the previous year. But I had that experience of being able to do it with very little coffee. One of the coffees for the New Zealand champion, Dove, from last year, I think we had 1.6 in green for one of his coffees. We had a lot of different processes, and one of them was 1.6 kilos. But I already knew some of the other coffees. Again, it was very similar in the case of having quite a few other different processes that were essentially excluded from the scenario because they weren't up to scratch, but at least it was practice in roasting. Aside from that, going into what was going to be this year's competition, I decided I wasn't going to play that game again. It was too stressful, and I wanted to be able to, I love, when I've chosen a coffee for competition, I love to drink it every day in every way possible. The worst possible brew, the best possible brew, filter coffee, cupping, everything, so that you become so intimate with the coffee that on the day of competition, if something unusual pops out, you're not surprised. So this year, I had 5 coffees and I got 30 kilos green of each, and individually vacuum packed them in batch sizes, 700 gram batch sizes for my roaster. And that way I knew exactly how much I had and exactly how much I was going to get out of it, and planned everything out in terms of what I would need. And I mean, I've already known from previous years about exactly how much coffee you need for each round, and you're dialing in backstage and things like that. So, very, very simple spreadsheets that you can lay out to factor in exactly how much coffee you need and minimize your waste at the same time. So if you have the option to have, 30 kilos of one coffee, if you're using small batches, then fantastic. But it can be done with as little as 1.6 kilos. So depends on how adventurous you're feeling, I guess.
I see that the main takeout of this is to get to know your coffee. Competitor need to get to know the coffee, roasted and brewed in very different ways. So we are closely approaching to the main part of the topic. How do we approach the roasting part of it? And here I will probably start with one question that will help to answer the previous one as well, is what is the optimal batch size when we roast for a competition, taking into account that let's take the situation when we do not freeze the coffee. So the one batch size is like has a lifetime of us tasting it over and over and still figuring out how old should be coffee for the competition. But also taking into account how many brews are in the round. So to have the same amount, the same batch roasted all over again. So what is the optimal batch size when we consider roasting for the competition, on your opinion? John, maybe let's get back to you for a moment.
Again, it definitely comes back to the size of your roaster. But in saying that, so what I've been roasting on for the last few years is obviously the Stronghold, the S7 Pro, and that's maximum 850. And actually, I haven't started roasting 850 grams until just recently. So previously, all of my batch sizes were either 500 grams or 700 grams. And my idea behind that, and this kind of stemmed from my early days of competition of roasting on vintage pro bats and smaller pro bats, was I find smaller batches gain you more clarity. So I would generally do espresso roast would be a smaller batch for the espresso course, and then for the milk course would generally be a larger batch. So in my particular roaster, I would do 500 grams in 2018. I did 500 grams for my espresso course, which was great because I only had not 3 kilos of that coffee. And then for the milk course, because you have a much larger mass of energy, you can tend to get a bit more texture and a bit more flavor development, especially if you're using naturals or anaerobic fermentations and carbonic macerations, things like that.
I'm gonna get back to
yeah, you get a larger thermal mass and a bit more kind of emphasis on flavor, bigger flavors, and being able to push out bigger flavors. So regardless of your roaster size, that's kind of my approach. Is majority of the time a little bit smaller for an espresso course for a barista, and bigger for a milk course.
I see. So we already have a different batch for espresso, different batch for milk course. As for brewing, Dajo, what's your experience in batch size, and what would you recommend?
Yeah, it really depends on the machine you're using. Most definitely, I think the smaller machine you can have, it's about this. It's about finding a machine that allows you to get a consistent result. So you can go as small.
This is exactly the question. If you would try not to stick to the machine, but rather look for the machine that fits the optimal size to work, to prepare, to brew it a number of times. That's probably how I would like to approach this.
You mean which machine to choose?
No. What is the batch size which is ideal regardless of which machine it is?
You mean in like percentage of whole capacity?
This is grams rather.
Yeah, I think look, from the experience I had to go down to like 8% because I only had access to that kind of machine. But I think ideally somewhere between 40%, 60% of maximal capacity gives you the most, I think, the most flexibility in your roast approach to what you want to do. I think if you go to a higher percentage of capacity, you might be a little more blocked, and as John said, have potential less clarity.
Mm-hmm. I found it like at least 300 grams per one batch makes it ideal, because if that would be just enough to cup it, to brew it several times, and to divide it into smaller pieces to look how it evolves over the time, to taste it like in some time as well. At least for brewer's cup. But other than this, then we want to have the bigger volumes, and we start to move from 300 maybe to a bigger one. But what's your take on the machines? And I know that many competitors stick to really small machines and have like 50 to 100 grams batch. What do you think are pros and cons of these small batch approaches? Mateusz, maybe let's start with you.
Well, when it comes to me, I always try to choose the most optimum batch size to roast it, to have a control over the RORs and the color, and be consistent. So when it comes to the roasting for competition, I choose specifically 500 grams for Stronghold. Because it was easy to divide, and in case something goes wrong, I still have access to the coffee. I'm not a big fan of roasting smaller batches because the control over it is shrinking. So I rather choose the optimum for myself, just for the competitor to have a best results as roasted coffee. So. When it comes to me, I'm not a big fan of roasting small, especially on Stronghold.
John, and in your before Stronghold times, what were you using, and how did this relate to batch sizes?
We were on UG15, so we would do. I think our smallest batch size was 5 kilos. But generally for espresso, we were looking at 10 to 12 kilos. So it was really kind of, and back then again, they were what I would use in coffee in competitions were production roasts. They were nothing kind of, overly special. It wasn't until around the kind of 2014 mark for me that actually Sangho had at that time. We'd actually I think we just got one of the very first Strongholds, but we also had another, this other roaster, I can't remember what it was, but it was a 1 kilo or 1.2 kilo, and he would do 1 kilo roast for me as well. And so that was great. I think a kind of 1.2 kilo roaster and that 1 kilo range for a yield is quite handy for those kind of things. But I've also played around with plenty of sample roasters as well. But I mean, when you look at what some of the competitors have done in the past in terms of using sample roasters, I mean, Andre Ullman is prime example of roasting on stage in 2017, which was, to me, that was probably my most favorite, competition, definitely from that year. Sorry, Dale, but that year was my favorite competition. Routine was being able to roast on stage is great, and that kind of fit what he was trying to do for that scenario. But I know some of the other guys in the past have used the Ikawa because of the small amount of coffees that they've had, but had to stay up all night roasting coffees. So, and then you've got to kind of you really wonder about the repeatability of those kind of things. Yes, these pieces of technology are built to be able to, produce repeatable results. But at the end of the day, it's putting a lot of stress, a lot of extra stress on somebody to be doing such small batches. I mean, I've done on the Stronghold. I don't know about you guys, but I've done 100-gram batches on the Stronghold with no problem whatsoever. But I would do that just to test the coffee, play with the coffee, and not waste so much, and just understand what is going on. I do have another smaller sample roaster, but
sometimes you only get a sample of like 100, 125,
yeah.
And I just roast it on Stronghold as well with
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have another smaller sample roaster that's actually made here in New Zealand. It's amazing. It's really affordable. The profile software for it is just constantly evolving, and the guys are doing an amazing job at this machine. But and it's great to be able to understand what a coffee is doing. But I really think to really understand where you need to be going and to be able to repeat something like that in competition anyway, you need to I can't imagine any smaller than a 500 gram batch on kind of any roaster anywhere is going to be any more beneficial than anything else. So.
Okay, so let's jump to a completely different side of the question. Okay, so you are a roaster, you have a competitor you're working with. You've got a new coffees that you haven't seen before, and what do you need to know to actually approach it to figure out the roast? So let's just create as many aspects as we need. I would probably start with the processing, maybe density. What else? What else do we need to know?
Screen size.
Okay, guys, I don't hear any of you, so.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was asking. Can you repeat the question?
What are we looking at? We've seen the coffee for the first time. We have the green in our hands. What do we need to know? What do we need to understand to approach the roasting? So it's a competition coffee, and we just need to start asking questions. So the processing, or is there some experiments in the processing? What else would be of our interest as the roasters?
For me, definitely first and foremost, the processing, because and as much information as you can find out about the processing, obviously linked with that is varietal and farm, whether or not you place too much emphasis on altitude, but understanding what that processing in is and how that could affect certain aspects of the coffee, and then moving on into moisture and density from there should give you, I think,
so moisture and density.
enough.
What else? What's going to be useful for us?
Well, I agree on the processing for sure. It's specifically for the roasters competition where we don't know coffee at all when we show up on the competitions. So the first aspect is what processing it is and what possible potential we can squeeze from the coffee in the next 4 days. So processing will tell you a lot, and you just want to understand the coffee in a roaster and just get out most of it in time that is actually dependent on the processing. So for sure, and the origin, of course.
Okay. Dajo, any additional aspects from your side?
That's about it. Maybe screen size. You have some beans that can be really big, very small. Can also have
that would affect a lot. So I'm hearing like the processing is our winner. So how do you guys approach the different processing? And let's start with the easy one, like natural versus washed. What are the differences approaching the roasting it for if we want to take the maximum points of it, of course.
Heat.
It's tricky.
I think the heat between the two is probably the biggest, where you're applying heat between a standard wash. Now let's keep it simple, standard wash and standard natural, and not go too crazy into the processing. But when I think about, I just actually received a couple of newer coffees recently, a wash, just standard wash process and a standard natural process from El Salvador, and I kind of forgotten how to roast normal coffees. And it was back to the kind of old days of roasting coffee and really being very specific on the heat application. So very different between the two coffees, of where you want to apply heat and your rate of rise and things like that. Just so vastly different between a standard wash and a natural.
And what do we do when we have more processing in hands? Like, let's say, guys, from your experience, any specific approach to, let's say, carbonic maceration, aerobic, anaerobic, any different kind of, how do you approach them? Is there any specific way to what to keep in mind for roasting those kind of different fermentations? Dayo, what's your experience here?
Well, honestly, I don't have experience roasting anaerobic coffees and this kind of crazy processes. So I'm also curious to hear. Maybe Mateus has more experience.
When it comes to the let's say new coffees or new wave coffees, I always try to choose the safe way of roasting it. So I give it in extra time to roast it. So my roast profile will be much longer, or not much, but longer than washed coffees. Specifically for the Nordic style coffees, we roast coffee very quickly. So in this scenario, the natural and anaerobic processed coffees, we stretch the roast, but we try to maintain quite a light color for the roasted coffee, just not to expose the not valuable taste profile for us. So I personally dislike the overwhelming acidity in this coffee. I mainly aim for coffee that is backed up with the sweetness. So that's my main approach when it comes to roasting it.
I see.
Yeah,
John, what was the craziest kind of processing that you have roasted, and what would be your advice in this specific kind of coffee?
Was that for me, was it? Sorry.
Yeah.
Hands down, the coffees that I had this year, and kind of going into, what everyone has said here is, so these were all different styles of carbonic maceration between whole cherry and honey, and I was actually fortunate enough to actually have also a standard wash coffee from this particular farm, and they were so difficult. The density, and they were really difficult to get any kind of roast loss from them, and development and things like that. And I had actually had. I wish I had have sent off all of the green for testing, but had sent off the standard wash and the honey processing, or carbonic maceration honey process, off for a lab test for full sugars content, acids, lipids, and I had an expectation of what would come back, and it was not really where I thought it was going to be. And this was going to be a big part to my whole competition for this year, was really understanding the implications of processing from a scientific level, and what we can do from taking from essentially low altitude farms, and what can be done to really change these coffees and bring them into the realms of specialty coffee and 90 plus coffees and things like that. And what I found really interesting was that the heightened level of acids across the board, not just any one specific acid, but across the board, the acids were so much higher than expected. And then obviously with any kind of fermentation, but specifically with this kind of style of fermentation, the consumption of sugars was a lot higher than I expected as well. So the standard wash coffee actually had overall a much higher level of sugars, of total sugars, compared to the carbonic maceration. So I didn't expect that difference in the sugar content between the two. So I think acids play a huge part here in these new style processing methods, and is actually also causing us some issues around roasting. And again, the same, I'm only just now getting to a point where I'm starting to enjoy these coffees, but yeah, I'm doing 700 or 850 gram roasts at up to 15 minutes. And really doing a massive heat soak in the beginning just to be able to get some of these coffees losing a bit of moisture, and finally at this point now starting to get some sort of decent development. So they end up being a very, very different style. And as I mentioned before, those just standard processed El Salvador's. Now I'm going back to kind of normal coffees, and I can really start to put some emphasis on the heat application in the roaster and go from anywhere from 8 minutes to 12 minutes on these coffees without having such a difficult time as these other processed coffees. So yeah, it's on a scientific level, these coffees are very, very different to what we've been used to. So we need very different approaches to them, I think.
Okay, I see. So I would squeeze you in a more complicated situation right now. So you've got a competitor, he sources the coffee. All he or she knows about the processing is it's like a double aerobic, anaerobic, so basically nothing that we know. A part of it, it's like a lot of experiments. And you basically have only a couple of batches. One of them should be the batch for the competition itself. So you have like 2 or 3 batches overall, which will be your experiments, as well as the batch for the competitors to actually work on preparing. So you know not much about the coffee. And you basically have 2 or 3 batches to test, try not to screw it completely. How would you roast it? What will you pay the most attention to, like as a quality control, as a result? How would you approach your first roast? What will you try to achieve?
So as John said before, the first thing I would look at is the processing and where it comes from. Then I would probably choose the safer way of roasting it. If I'm successful, if the color is right and the roasting development is okay, then I'll probably go for something more risky. This is similar in case of the roasting competition, that you have only 2 roasts of each coffee, and there's not much time to think. It's it's just you have to evaluate the coffee the way you feel it, and your knowledge gives you the possibility to do that. So again, I would choose the risky part and the safe part.
Okay. Dayo, and how did you approach like the first batch of the coffee?
That's a good question. First of all, I got to know the machine because I didn't have experience on the machine. So I was using a sample roaster, so I basically went kind of crazy at the start. And then from finding a decent profile, went more into fine-tuning. So that was from the first part when using a sample roaster, and I could use a lot of batches. But then when I decided to move to a bigger roaster, I only had maybe like five batches for the actual competition. So then I kind of switched back, looked for a very similar coffee I could find, and tested that to find kind of a good roast profile. Then did that profile with the competition coffee, and that actually got a really good starting point from where I just could fine-tune a little bit.
I see. Okay. I want to touch just one more but really big question before we end our panel today. That one will be in relation to the possibilities of the Stronghold and your experience with Stronghold for the competition coffee. Like what are the tricks that it gave to you in a way, like let's say the halogen radiation possibilities or the drum speed possibilities, and overall how to approach the competition coffee on a Stronghold, and what makes it different from the roasters that you've been roasting before, like a regular drum roaster or sampler. Mateusz, maybe you'd like to start here about what are the controls and aspects that you use most, and what is the end result, how it's different from a regular drum.
Well, actually, we don't roast coffee that different from a regular drum roaster, because the main parameter I look at is ROR at certain stages of the roasting. So when it comes to the competition coffee, I would probably roast it slightly lighter than on a regular day basis, because that can expose more nice aspects of the coffee. Well, what should I say? I think that the major part that plays a role in the roasting is for me is hot air that actually helps me to maintain the ROR and start the certain chemical reactions in roasting in the last stage of roasting. So that's what I mainly look at to just take a maximum potential from the coffee while I roast it.
Okay.
So,
yeah. John, you mentioned that Stronghold kind of changed the way you live with the competition coffee. What do you use most? What are the features, and what does it give for yourself?
I think for me, especially that first year in 2018, it was almost an experience of learning how to roast all over again. I felt it was quite different using the halogen to start with, but competing and roasting my own coffee at the same time, it was when I got to a point where I was happy with, it allowed me to then be able to use the replay profiles to just repeat, and then I was able to multitask on doing many other things, whether it was packing coffee or getting things ready for practice and things like that. So the repeatability side of things, and I'd gone through and done all my color testing, and I would always record all my the weight loss and your total roast yield and things like that. And so it gave me a little bit more of that safety net of knowing when I do reach that point that I'm happy with, I know I can repeat it again. Whereas with traditional roasters, it was always a huge risk of even though if you had a profile with whatever software you're using, being able to repeat that profile is a big chance. So the repeatability of it for me was a game changer. It enabled me to do so many other things while prepping, and even with the New Zealand champion last year, coaching him as well. Or if you're sample roasting too, there's been times where I've had a sample roaster running at the same time as the Stronghold, and literally running automated profiles on both and backwards and forwards. So as well as packing coffee, backpacking individual doses and things like that. So being able to multitask, but aside from that, having that flexibility, I've always loved from way back in kind of 2010. Always been very interested in drum speed control. So that was a big game changer for me to be able to put a lot of different kind of influences through drum speed in different parts of the roast. And obviously having those two heat aspects, and being able to, when I approach a coffee now on the Stronghold, it's I'll definitely do roasts where I'm just using just hot air, or hot air and halogen together to be able to see how much the halogen influences the hot air, and the same with the drum speed. depending on what part of the roast. I'll try and do the same roast profile without adjusting drum speed or even the batch sizing and doing multiple ones at different drum speeds. So having that control and then be able to go back, taste, look at the profiles and repeat whichever one you want that kind of hits the notes that you want is kind of key there. So there's a lot of data and a lot of information that I think is extremely valuable.
Great to hear. From my experience, by the way, the ways that the flavors develop after the roasting is a bit different from what I experienced before. I mean, after just like after the roast, or even after a couple of days of the roast, the coffee is still, I feel like it's not opening up just yet. At the same time, if you have the coffee after, let's say, 1 month without freezing, it is there like way more than you could get after 1 week. So in my personal experience, it's like the whole peak of the taste is extended with a Stronghold. Maybe it's just my opinion. Do you guys have similar experience?
I totally agree. As we spoke, that like the peak for the coffee I experienced best from the Stronghold is 2 weeks after the roasting. So you get the higher clarity and the flavor is settled. And yeah, quite often coffee can be disappointing right after roasting on Stronghold. It's a different experience with the drum roaster though.
Dajo, and what kind of experience did you have?
Well, I only tested the Stronghold once, and I was really impressed with mainly with the replication mode. I have not yet been able to really test how. I don't have enough experience to say how the aging goes compared to other roasters. But I'm excited to test that more when my Strongholder will arrive here.
Okay, I see. Of course, there's so many more questions toward the regarding the roasting for competitions, and it's quite interesting and important to consider many factors. But unfortunately, our time is getting up. Maybe one last suggestion or one last word, something you wanted to say during the panel but didn't have a chance to all roasters and competitors out there regarding the roasting for competitions. Any last word, any farewell word? John, maybe let's start with you.
I was actually going to say a second ago, in terms of the aging of the coffee, I discovered something quite interesting the other day. I had ground too much coffee for my morning coffee and kept the second ground batch for the next day, and it was just open in general, and brewed that same coffee the next morning and was like very well surprised that this was ground coffee from 24 hours ago, left out in the open, and it was still phenomenal coffee, and I don't think I've ever experienced that before from any coffee, being able to have it pre-ground. I've done a lot of testing on pre-ground up to 30 minutes, but nothing at 24 hours. So I was exceptionally surprised at the kind of flavor development that happened from pre-ground.
Mateusz, and you?
So when it comes to roasting for the competition, I would like to advise all the competitors to think outside of the box, but be in the right box, and just to communicate with the roasters who will roast coffee for you. And if you're a roaster, just communicate with the farmers to learn most about the coffee you will compete with, and yeah, stay close to the community.
Thank you. Dajo, and you?
Yeah, well, we don't know when competition will be back, so that's kind of an uncertain time. But I think for me, the most important part in competing is the whole process behind it, is like exploring, learning, doing experiments. And I think this you can still do. So even if there's maybe not a certain competition yet, this whole situation shouldn't hold you back to keep experimenting and searching to improve yourself, your knowledge about coffee.
Okay, thank you so much, dear participants, dear attendees, dear panelists. I would just to remind one more time that follow our accounts, Stronghold Square, to be up to date regarding the upcoming panels that are happening very soon. And if you have an idea of a great topic or you would like to suggest a great speaker, also mail me. You all have my email in your registration, so I will be glad to receive this and follow up with your suggestions. Thank you everyone for coming, for watching, and thank you, dear Mateus, John, and Dajo for your
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you, everyone.
guys.
Bye bye.
Okay.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Have a lovely day or evening. Bye bye.